Ring the bells that still can ring, baby. How many of you were at the Leonard Cohen event last night? I think Carrie was so right that guy was really prescient in a way that we didn't even appreciate at the time, I don't think. This is the sound. Good morning, by the way. Good morning. Lovely to see you. This is the sound of Voices 2. If that sentence were a visual image, I think it might look something like this. So we were on the island a couple of weeks ago and hiking on Mount Doug, and the lilies were out in bloom. And my friend Linda spotted this one. It's kind of a rare thing to see two flowers on the same stalk. I think bees call this a double bagger. They like that very much. And Linda has said that she has even seen a triple bagger up there on Mount Doug. And so we were exploring that area, and we went, as we were heading up toward the summit, we turned around a corner, and the lilies, they're called fawn lilies, the whole mountainside was a swim in fawn lilies. It was like, this is the sound of all of us. And our man Emerson said, if I get this right, the earth laughs in flowers. And it does, but sometimes the earth can't quite muster a laugh. And sometimes we can't quite muster a laugh. Sometimes the sound of all of us looks a little less like this and a little more like this. This is the sound of all of us when we've kind of had just about enough. And we're starting to push back against creeping authoritarianism, against injustice, against all the things that we know we have to stand against. And that's kind of where we're going today in this service. And it's my great pleasure to say that we have Wanda Morris with us, and a lot of you will be familiar with Wanda. She was in our congregation for many years until you left about a decade ago to head to Toronto. This is lovely. Jani was trying to prepare a name tag for you, Wanda, and she went to the rack and realized your name tag was still there from 10 years ago. We're still holding a light out for you, should you ever want to come back. Now, Wanda's going to be talking about activism today, and it's a subject that I'm close to because I have a complicated relationship with activism, and I'll just briefly tell you why. In journalism, like when I started way back when, the rule was kind of that you were trying to report objectively. You know, your job was just to call the balls and strikes and not get materially involved in any story you were reporting on. It was just, he said, she said, they said, we all scream for ice cream. Just call it as you see it and not describe the world as it is through your lens, not how you want it to be, and let the reader sort it out, right? But then I went to work for the alternative press, and we did a lot of advocacy journalism. So that is, like, we really did take a side on a lot of issues. And around the time I was in that job, it happened that some of the most major civil disobedience events in Canadian history were happening kind of just up the road. The Carmanah Valley protection, and then the Walbrand Valley after that. Mass arrests, mass demonstrations as people tried to protect these pristine ancient rainforests. So we covered those events, but then the question was, how far do we go here? Should we be laying down our pen and actually physically laying down on the road in front of these machines? Because the numbers matter, right? It's all about, if everybody did it, they can't arrest everybody. And so it was a conundrum, and I never did it. I never took that final step. And as a result, I have a clean criminal record, but maybe not so clean a conscience. I'm still struggling with that, and that's something that I hope that maybe Wanda can help me sort out. Maybe you can psychoanalyze me a little bit. Anyway, we're in for a very special service today. Thanks again for Wanda, and let's get it started by singing. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
I don't come up quite yet. So, in the spirit of activism, We are doing a hymn with actions. Okay, so if you can stand, I would encourage you to stand. If you can't, don't worry about it. So you can actually stay seated just for now, probably. So it goes like this. Earth my body, where you're pressing down, earth on the ground. Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath, and fire my spirit. Okay, everybody with me. Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath, and fire my spirit. Good. You can all say it. You can say it as well. You don't have to just listen. Ready? Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath, and fire my spirit. Good. And it goes like this. Like me. So, ready with me. Listen first. Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath, and fire my again. And earth my body, water my blood, air my breath, and fire my and again. Earth my body, water my fire. Come on up. Air my breath, and fire my and again. Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath, and fire my spirit. Earth my body, water my blood, air my breath, and fire my spirit. Earth my body, water my spirit, and fire my spirit. And my body,
Nice. Welcome again, everybody. Welcome to North Shore Unitarian, where we take it as our mission to try to live and to try to help each other live with depth, meaning, and purpose. And hope, which is a rarer and rarer commodity these days. My name's Bruce Grierson, and I'm thrilled to be your guide dog this morning. There are 5 of us on this team. 3 dogs and 2 cats, I would say, although not all of us have self-identified, and you got to respect that. If you're new to this congregation or new to this faith tradition, let me share that we're a tradition built on connection, not dogma. We're dogs without dogma. Our roots are in Judeo-Christian traditions, but what we've evolved into is a culture of ethics, a culture of moral behavior not affiliated with any religion, but with elements common to all the major religions. A culture that's radically inclusive, no matter where you come from, or what is your religious story. And by the way, I don't have one counts as a religious story. No matter who you are or how you roll, no matter who you love or how you experience the sacred, we hope you feel lavishly welcome here. Now, this particular group meets each week, gratefully, on the ancestral and living territories of the Coast Salish people, whom we pledge to keep front of mind as this work of reconciliation continues. Now, another thing about this faith tradition, we like our candles very much. Lighting a candle to begin the proceedings has been in the mix with this faith for 200 years. And this morning, I'm pleased to say, Wanda's going to do the honors. Now, here's the Joe Friday brief on Wanda Morris. As mentioned, she was a member of this congregation for many... You can come on up. We'll do this together. She was a member of this congregation for many years until her move to Toronto and later South Surrey about 10 years ago. Wanda's a former professional accountant, but she made a pivot in midlife. Inspired by Unitarian teaching, she earned a master's degree in transforming spirituality. I want to know more about that. And she became a social activist who worked to change our laws around medically assisted dying, pension protection, and increasing folks' entitlements under the Canada Pension Plan. Wanda's joined today by her husband Tony and son Max, sitting here in the front row. Please say hi to them on the way out. And both of them were frequent visitors to our church, and you'll be familiar faces to many people here. Let's do it. We kindle this flame as a symbol of our gathering.
Light of understanding, need of darkness, the warmth of sharing, thanks, peace.
Now, our second candle is our candle of joys and concerns, and I think I might have to kind of crowdsource this one because I don't actually have anything written down for this. Does anybody have a joy that they want to shout out? No joys today. It's a lovely. Okay, well, it's all okay. It doesn't have to be anything specific. We could just be joyful. Anything we want to keep front of mind?
Walking on the second Saturday.
Yes, I'm going to mention that later. But we can mention it now, too. Yeah, that was fun.
You missed the first Easter, there's Orthodox Easter today. So we get to celebrate Easter on the other calendar.
See, Easter on the other calendar today. And how do you celebrate that? What would be the... Do you do the Matryoshka thing? What is that called? Pasenko. Pascha. All right. Nice. Okay. All right, a very special day for you then. Thank you. All right, so our final candle is the candle of global concerns. And I want to do this one a little bit differently this morning. Often we direct our attention to some hot spot in the world, and there are no end of candidates at the moment, Darfur, Ukraine, Gaza, Iran, Lebanon. But instead of a place, today I want to talk about an idea. And this is, you can hang in here with me, or you can go back. This is an idea that I think is gaining traction, bubbling up from the grassroots. It's called pirate care. Pirate care, and it all started with this book, thanks Wanda, by a husband and wife team from Croatia who stood up and said, folks, here's the deal. The world has changed. The institutions that used to care for us are being gutted. What we used to think of as basic human rights, things like housing, medical attention, education, mobility, access to information, those things can't be counted on anymore in a lot of countries. So many people are slipping through the cracks and left to fend for themselves. Or worse, they're being scapegoated as the problem themselves by oppressive governments and actively targeted. And here's where the pirate carers come in. Pirate carers are like a guerrilla emergency response team. The emergency is the collapse of social safety nets all around the world. People are falling through the holes and they're dangling off the edges. And so onto the scene swoop the pirate carers like a kind of North Shore rescue of civil society. So here's an example. There's a group based in southern Arizona called, near the Mexican border, called No Más Muertes, No More Deaths. So the present U.S. administration has a plan for dealing with illegal Mexican migrants. It funnels them into dangerous areas in the desert. It's a strategy called organized abandonment. So what No Más Muertes does is it goes looking for these woebegone people, often whole families left for dead out there. And when it finds them, gives them a little water, a little food, some first aid. And then whatever happens after that, whether they press on or go back, at least they have a shot at arriving there alive. That's pirate care. So here's another example closer to home. Groups in Minneapolis coordinating to deliver groceries or medication to residents who can't leave their home for fear of being iced. That's pirate care. Now, none of this is strictly legal, right? Because you're aiding and abetting potential criminals, right? And your government can come after you for that if that's the way your government is rolling these days. So the pirate carers are scapegoated as the bad guys too. And you know what? Honey Badger don't care. The pirate carers don't care. They're going to do what they have to do because this is where we're at now. In the UK, there's a pirate care group called Docs Not Cops. I don't know if you guys have heard of this. It sprang up in response to a law cracking down on illegal immigration. New legislation in the UK, I think this is still the case, requires emerged doctors to do identity checks on all incoming patients. That way the government can nab undocumented migrants when they become too sick to hide. And what's happening is whole medical staffs at hospitals are refusing. They're saying, we're docs, not cops. Healthcare professionals are obliged to provide care and mercy to people in need. That's a higher law than your law. It's simply what humans owe to one another, full stop. I think of the pirate carers not as outlaws, but as in-laws. They swoop in an emergency the way that your family would. To me, it would be a real pirate care move for us if we let refugees fleeing from their country have sanctuary in this building. There's a UU tradition in this. We should talk about it. So here's a bit of breaking news you're in on early on. A friend of mine is starting a new political party in Canada based on the pirate care model. He's calling it the Black Spot Party. And he actually got a black spot tattooed on the third knuckle of his punching hand, like this guy. The black spot is a pirate logo. It's like, I think of it as the Pirates away jersey when they're not flying the Jolly Roger. Black spot. So pirates, the original pirates of the Caribbean pirates used to say, our flag means death. But pirate carers say, our flag means life. Human dignity is at stake here, and if you find our methods a little radical, well, desperate times require desperate measures. And what's great about all of this to me is, even if you find a party like that just too far out, you'd never vote for them, it forces you to ask what care is, what it even is, and how can it be integrated into the rough and tumble of modern political life, which is so unforgiving. Martin Luther King, that great pirate carer, said that care changes the expression of power, but it doesn't kill it. It actually boosts it. Care gives power its enfolding strength. Pirate care is everything we do to maintain, continue, and repair our world so we can live in it as well as possible. No one excluded, no one diminished. I invite us to take a moment of silence around this idea. Let your heart and your mind go where they want to go.
In 2025, Yoon Suk-yeol, the former president of South Korea, attempted an insurrection. He is now serving a life sentence in prison. In 2024, Jair Bolsonaro, the former president of Brazil, planned a coup to regain power after he lost the election. He is currently serving a 27-year prison sentence. In 2021, Donald Trump attempted to prevent the peaceful transfer of power through the use of fraudulent slates of electors and an attack on the Capitol. He was never sanctioned. We are seeing the rise of right-wing populism around the world, and nowhere is it more dangerous than in our neighbor to the south. Donald Trump is now back in power and is transforming the US into a kleptocracy. That is, a society or system ruled by people who use their power to steal their country's resources. According to Forbes, in March of this year, Donald Trump was worth $6.5 billion. Whether it's through accepting bribes for favorable policies, insider trading, or tax cuts for the rich, Trump and his regime are becoming unimaginably wealthy, while ordinary Americans suffer. You might be saying, well, that's too bad, but that's the US. We're Canada. Why do we care? Well, as Pierre Trudeau famously put it, living next to you, the US, is in some ways like sleeping with an elephant. No matter how friendly and even-tempered is the beast, if I can call it that, one is affected by every twitch and grunt. But these days, it's not just about twitches and grunts. Donald Trump has repeatedly expressed his desire to turn Canada into the 51st state. A group advocating for Alberta to separate from Canada met with Trump administration officials in the US and sought a $500 billion US line of credit to help fund an independent Alberta. In January of this year, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said this: "The Albertans are very independent people. There are rumors that they may have a referendum on whether they want to stay in Canada or not. People are saying, people are talking, people want sovereignty." Reddit and TikTok posters claim that anti-Canada narratives are increasingly being pushed in US social media. While they don't have proof for that claim, it's clear that American support of Canada is decreasing, and the drop is surprisingly sharp. Gallup polling shows perceptions of Canada as positive now down to 80%, and an Abacus data poll showed only 64% of Americans with a positive or somewhat positive view of Canada. That's a breathtaking drop from the 91% noted by Gallup just a year ago. Now is not the time to sit idly by. We might look to our business leaders to save us, but history shows that is unlikely to happen. In an article called "The Great Grovel," former MP and journalist Charlie Angus writes that the most striking thing about the re-election of Donald Trump is how quickly the leaders of business, politics, universities, and law firms capitulated. They didn't just throw in the towel, they publicly bent the knee and kissed the gangster's ring. He continues by saying that history teaches us that when people are forced to put their beliefs on the line, those with the most power and prestige rarely step up. History has always been led by the ordinary people who have the most to lose, even when the odds against them are enormous. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a pastor in Germany jailed and then executed by the Nazis, said this: "The role of the church is not simply to bandage the victims under the wheel, but to jam a spoke in the wheel itself." So how do we step up? In olden times, being a warrior was relatively easy. You just threw, poked, or fired the pointy thing at the other person's soft bits while keeping your own soft bits covered. Simple, brutal, clear. But those days are gone. The modern battlefield isn't marked by blood and banners. It's in our conversations, our communities, and our consciences. One way we could act is by attending a sign waving. These are very common in political campaigns. People gather on a corner or perhaps an overpass, waving signs with a slogan or the name of their favorite candidate, hoping for honks. And then there are larger scale demonstrations. Hundreds of thousands of people gathered in support of No King's Day in the US and around the world. It was a compelling sight. But what do these protests achieve? Look, I'm a fan. I attended a recent one in Mexico in solidarity with the ICE protests in the US, but they have their limits. They're great for building coalitions, creating hope where participants might be feeling despair. And people who are involved in a rally or protest are more likely to vote. But if you want to compel a government to overturn an unpopular policy, they are not your best tool. One tool we do have is economic power. For example, Canadian travel to the US gives us enormous leverage, and we are using it. According to the CBC, Canadians returning from trips to the US fell 22% in January 2026 compared with a year earlier. That's the 13th consecutive month of decline. Forbes put the cost of decreased Canadian tourism to the US at $4.5 billion in 2025 alone. While the US regime appears unmoved by hardships to its residents, they are keenly interested in their trade balances. The US ambassador to Canada, Pete Hoekstra, noted that the US might need to close down the pre-clearance customs offices at Canadian airports. Clearly, the Trump regime is irritated by the drop in Canadian travel. Now, if you have family in the US, I'm not advocating that you stop visiting them. We need connection now more than ever. But if you're considering a weekend or a week away or a snowbird holiday, then I really encourage you to look elsewhere. Another powerful way we can protest the US is by boycotting US products and media. The good news is that we are already doing this, and our retailers are giving us more Canadian and non-US international options. You've probably noticed it's much easier to get non-US produce at the grocery store, but it goes beyond that. While I've recently bought Moroccan oranges and Chilean grapes, I've also chosen bed sheets from India. And when our truck was written off after a bad accident, we chose one of the 2 replacement options that wasn't made in the US. Yes, every dollar counts. So buying Shreddies rather than Raisin Bran, shopping at Canadian Tire rather than Amazon, or picking up a coffee at BC-based Delaney's or Cafe Artigiano rather than at Starbucks really does make a difference. You might be thinking, really? I have to give up my favorite wine or my week in Hawaii? I've worked hard. I deserve to treat myself. I get it. I love tea, and my favorite tea, a tea that I love, 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 is from the US. I used to buy giant bags of it so I could drink it several times a day, but I haven't bought it since Trump was reelected. I count it as a small price to pay to protest against a regime that as of April 4th had over 600,000 immigrants in detention under ICE. We may wonder about the effectiveness of a boycott, but the reality is economic protests are the single most important tool that we have. On September 17th, 2025, Jimmy Kimmel spoke out against the American MAGA movement in connection with the shooting of Charlie Kirk. The next day, September 18th, following public pressure from conservatives and the Trump regime, Walt Disney canceled the show. Then people reacted, not just with words, but with their wallets. They canceled their Disney streaming subscriptions, they canceled their Disneyland vacations, and they canceled their Disney cruises. 5 days later, September 23rd, Disney reinstated the show. Protest for show, boycott for results. In France, over 500,000 people participated in a union-backed strike on September 10th, 2025, protesting then Prime Minister Lecornu's austerity measures. As a result, 2 public holidays were reinstated, and the strikes ultimately led to the defeat of the government in a non-confidence vote later that month. In India, Prime Minister Modi reversed 3 agricultural laws passed in 2020 after over 200 farmers' organizations joined the protest, blocking major highways into Delhi for over a year. Harvard political scientist Erica Chenoweth has built the world's largest data set on civil resistance movements, analyzing over 550 mass mobilizations from 1900 to 2018. Her conclusion is striking. Chenoweth states that the strike is probably the single most potent method of nonviolent action possible, noting that if a city population stays home for a week or 2 without going to work, the economy grinds to a halt. Chenoweth notes that mass demonstrations are not always the most effective way of applying pressure to elites, and that other techniques of non-cooperation, such as general strikes and stay-at-homes, can be much more disruptive to economic life and thus elicit more immediate concessions. So we need to guard our wallets and ask others to do the same. But we are also called to speak out. So how do we have those conversations? This past winter, I was near Lake Chapala in Mexico, where I met an American at the local community center's weekly euchre competition. While we waited for the match to start, I mentioned US politics and the latest outrage from Trump. While the other 2 Canadians at the table nodded their agreement, my American table mate looked uncomfortable. "This isn't the place for politics," he said. "Are you a Trump supporter?" I asked. "This isn't the place," he continued. I was not to be silenced. I said that if he was a Trump supporter, it was either because he was uninformed about Trump's policies and too lazy to correct his ignorance, or a racist and a bigot who supported cruel and inhumane treatment of others, and neither position was acceptable. He once again repeated that this really wasn't the place. "No," I continued, "the Trump regime is deporting immigrants and shooting protesters. I will not be silenced. We are in Nazi Germany, and I refuse to be a collaborator." True story. Yeah, I was a friggin' warrior. It was only the next day, when describing my triumph to a friend, that I started to think a bit differently. She said, "What was his reaction during this exchange?" I paused to reflect. Well, I guess there wasn't much, other than repeating that this isn't the place. He crossed his arms. He didn't make eye contact. He kind of shut down. I realized that while my words made me feel great, they were largely ineffective. You don't change people by denouncing them. You don't shout understanding into existence. And then I remembered being on the other side of a diatribe. Years ago, I went to a Toastmasters group to practice speaking. One session, I gave what I thought was a killer speech. When my evaluator began offering feedback, shamefully, I barely listened. I was too busy watching the person beside me who was counting the ballots for best speaker. I was hoping I had that prize. At the end of the meeting, the general evaluator called me out in front of everyone. He didn't just correct my behavior, he dissected it. He pointed out my inattention, my arrogance, my disrespect. He was right, but that prolonged public dressing down was excruciating. I sat there, burning with shame, trapped, longing for the floor to open up. When the session ended, I wanted to apologize, but I could barely hold back my tears. I left without saying a word, and I never went back. He had probably hoped to teach me humility, Instead, I learned humiliation. Correction offered with empathy builds connection. Correction delivered with judgment builds scars. Even without condemnation or judgment, trying to lecture someone into agreement is a poor strategy. I remember one of my many therapy sessions, yes, slow learner, where I was exasperated that all my efforts to change a sibling hadn't worked. They were experiencing financial difficulties, but wouldn't stop overspending. I'd reasoned, encouraged, questioned, advised. I'm a former accountant. I gave great advice. I'd prodded. I'd even offered to prepare a spreadsheet, but nothing changed. My therapist took it in and then said, "You are powerless to change them. In fact, the harder you try, the less effective you'll become. They know they have a spending problem, but when you push, you give them an easier target. They can focus on being angry at you instead of changing their own behavior." Ouch. When it comes to lecturing and hectoring, it truly does feel better to give than receive. Okay, so if compelling words, great advice, and personal conviction all strike out, what can we do? Sometimes all it takes is a single word. One day I was walking down the street with a friend when I thoughtlessly dropped a piece of litter. My friend looked at me and said, "Really?" Not angry, not judgmental, just surprised. Oops, I picked it up. Never done it again. That's the power of small words. Really? Wow. Oh. They don't attack. They awaken. They let the other person remain whole even as they change. Harshness hardens people, but gentleness disarms them. Okay, but what if we want to say more than one word? Any political campaigner will tell you that change happens through conversation, through the hard work of knocking on doors and talking to voters. But how do we have those conversations? Whether we are fighting a political campaign or talking to someone at a local card game, our word choices are critical. Psychological studies have shown, worriedly, that in our memories, we don't distinguish between being told something and being told that that something is false. So if we use the words that someone else has said, even to deny or negate them, the very act of using those words reinforces them. Anyone with kids will likely recognize this. It's why when we say, "Don't play with water guns in the house," what they hear is, "Play with water guns in the house." In media training, one of the first lessons is not to swallow the question. That means don't just repeat a question, reframe it. So if someone asks, "Why do you oppose tax reductions?" the answer is not, "Here's why I oppose tax reductions." It's, "I support a strong social safety net," or "I believe in properly funding environmental protections." When it comes to conversations with populists, you might hear fake news, ivory tower academics, or anti-Semitic. Eschew those words. Reframe them. Talk about trusted news sources, evidence-based research, or innocent people dying. How we speak is important, but the most important thing is that we are willing to do so. Psychologists talk about the false consensus effect. It's the tendency to assume that most people, especially those we like, share our beliefs and attitudes. We think, surely everyone here feels the same way I do. But often they don't. So when someone has harmful ideas and beliefs, and those aren't challenged, they mistake silence for approval. Our Unitarian tradition calls us to model the words and deeds of prophetic women and men to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. I've had friends say to me, when describing other friends, "We just don't talk about politics," or, more forthrightly, "I can't bring up politics and keep the friendship." Well, While appeasement and going along to get along can prevent hard feelings, that's a luxury we don't have right now. Social ostracism is a powerful tool. We can't control how people think and who they vote for, but we can stop making it comfortable for them. How can we let it slide for the sake of an old friendship if someone supports a regime that explicitly allows for the indefinite detention of children and families? We cannot be silent and uphold our Unitarian principle of belief in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. As Canadians, we don't have a voice in US politics, but we can and must encourage our own leaders to speak out. Until recently, world leaders were largely silent regarding the genocide in Gaza. Not only that, but decades of Israel settlements encroaching onto Palestinian territory went largely unremarked. I believe the silence was at least partially responsible for Israel's decision to bomb and kill innocent people in Lebanon. I believe that Russia's 2014 invasion and then annexation of the Crimean Peninsula without consequences more severe than limited economic sanctions, emboldened them, and was at least partially responsible for their decision to invade Ukraine again in 2022. In contrast, when Europe and Canada stood firmly united in solidarity with Greenland's right to sovereignty, the Trump regime backed off from its threats to take over the region. In the words of former slave Frederick Douglass, the limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. Passivism and appeasement get us nowhere. We need to break our silence, but not with rage, with calm. A question or comment can create a space to think differently. Do you realize when you buy from Amazon, you're not only supporting a billionaire that has given over $40 million to President Trump and his wife, you're supporting a company that has been widely criticized for using unfair trade practices? You know, if you choose Mexico instead of Florida for your vacation, you're putting a pressure on a regime that sent over 200 immigrants to a maximum security prison in El Salvador, the majority with no criminal record, in defiance of a federal judge's order. Even responding to a comment with, "That doesn't sound like the compassion I know you value," can shift the air in a room. Not an attack, just an invitation to think again. You might be saying, "But Wanda, that's easy for you. You're an advocate. You've been trained to do this. I'm an introverted people pleaser. I can't." Well, in the words of Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead, someone has to do something. It's just incredibly pathetic. It has to be us. When you stay silent, when you don't interject with even a wow or a really, when you allow a harmful or cruel view to pass unchallenged, you are silently acquiescing to a government that is silencing protesters and threatening genocide in the wider world. And you know what? There is nothing more dangerous than an introverted people pleaser when they finally decided they've had enough. And when people do change their minds, our role is to welcome them, because that moment can be so tender. When someone starts to see things differently, the last thing they need is "I told you so." They don't need judgment. They need belonging. Spanish grammar has a way of speaking that reflects this spirit. When someone breaks a lamp, in Spanish we don't say, "You broke the lamp." We say, "La lámpara se rompió." Literally, the lamp broke itself. There's no blame, no accusation. The focus shifts away from fault towards understanding. And that tiny bit of grace makes it easier for the person who made the mistake and for everyone watching them to change. Because blame makes people dig in. Acceptance helps them open up. That's what turns confrontation into communion and strangers into allies. So may we fight not to conquer, but to awaken. Not with diatribes, but with questions. Not with lectures, but with connection. And sometimes with just one little word. Really?
Well, it's now time to enter into the spiritual practice of generosity, and in the spirit of using your economic power to make change, it's time for our offering. This month we're supporting the Pacific Salmon Foundation. All donations marked outreach, and that distinguishes them from the tip jar for this congregation, will go to this BC-based NGO, which is devoted to helping salmon populations recover and thrive. And the work is really valuable work, including habitat restoration, and it aligns with other groups like the North Shore Streamkeepers, who will be coming on our Earth Day service to give a little presentation. Week on week, your generosity, thanks Elaine, thanks Judith, is so appreciated. And a special thanks to those of you who who pledge annually. It's what helps keep the lights on and the heat on in this beautiful building, and it keeps our staff committed to bringing everything they got week after week. Thank you again. All righty. A little bit light on announcements, which is probably good because we're a little light on time as well. Super Sunday today. Please, if you're hungry and haven't eaten lunch, please join us downstairs. Soup is a suggested donation of $5, but come on down. Just you guys get in for free today. That's our guess. The new walking group, we mentioned that. It's going to happen every other Saturday. We meet in Lynn Valley at End of the Line Cafe. We started yesterday.
Second Saturday of every month the next 2 months.
But what did I say?
Every second Saturday. And that's what it says.
Every second Saturday. And I said
Of each month.
every second Saturday of each month. All right, for the next 2 months, and then all bets are off after. Okay, and then here's a lovely, there we go. That was yesterday's group. And everybody, and Jim and Marcia sitting king and queenly there. Anyway, that was lovely, and there's a fast group and a slow group, so don't worry that you're going to end up, left behind. Next Sunday, Reverend Sean Golche from Vancouver Church is going to scrub in for a service called Everyday Resistance. Kind of sounds like it rhymes a bit with what we talked about today. How to hold hope in this crazy world, how we respond in the moments of truth, both large and small, that define our lives and reveal our deepest values. Rebecca will be assisting Sean next week. I had a couple more announcements, but they're not super important, so I'm going to suggest you keep your eye on the e-bulletin for more on those. They're not for next week anyway. That may be it. Let's do our closing hymn, and then I have one more little outshot after that. Come and go with me to that land. Stand or take your seats for about 2 minutes for my final little closer here. You can judge for yourself how much stamina you still have. All right, here's the Stephen Lewis quote here. When you see something that's not right, you must say something. You must do something. Democracy is not a state, it is an act. I figure we can't not acknowledge maybe the greatest human rights crusader Canada has ever produced. We lost Stephen Lewis 2 weeks ago at age 88. Stephen Lewis, who understood better than almost anyone how the problems of the world are distributed. Gender inequality, income inequality, environmental degradation, those things aren't equally spread around. They hit poor places hardest. And there's no better proof of that than in Africa. Stephen Lewis was appointed UN Special Envoy to Africa during the HIV/AIDS crisis there in the 80s. There he is. And that's when he really showed the world what was happening there in Africa and to Africa. Lewis was a refined and gentle man who got a little bit possessed when he saw things were not being done, and we had the means to do them. Like a treatment for HIV had been around for 9 years in the developed world, but it hadn't been provided to Africa. In a speech on the floor of the UN, he said, "I am in a great rage now as I understand how many lives have been lost." Lewis reminded the world of, as he put it, the grotesque injustice of global inequality. And I'm sorry that that's not a barrel of laughs to end on, but so be it. Let's extinguish our flame. We put out this flame. The world calls us to live with depth, meaning, and purpose. Thank you to everybody who made this service so special. Especially thanks to Wanda. Thank you guys for accompanying her. And let's circle around.